All right. Hey, everybody. We had all kinds of things happen. And, of course, you try not to make those things issues, but, sometimes things get a little bit overwhelming. We had to put our dog to sleep last night. And, of course, that's never a good thing, and that's always a struggle. And then, of course, when you know it, for all you folks in live stream who usually get a good dose of music in ahead of time before we bring Instagram online, we unfortunately, our broadcaster, the thing that we use that actually broadcasts and takes us all over the world and takes us to YouTube as well, and Facebook and whatnot, it came up with a firmware failure at about 10 o'clock this morning. And so I frantically tried to get in touch with Livestream, and of course, no response. And so we had to go back old school. And so we are broadcasting to you via Verizon and a bunch of cell phones. So hopefully all of this is working. Instagram, I think we're kind of cocked a little bit to the side, but it looks crooked, but that's okay. Hey, before we get started, we're going to have a quick word of prayer. Okay. Father in heaven, take this time and this effort, and we just ask that you would anoint it, and that you would just be with us, lift us, and God, there's some really important stuff in here, and even if you're only speaking to me and to Lisa and to a handful of people, help us understand what it is that you're trying to say. And if you see fit, take this message to many and help us all to get a greater glimpse of you. I pray these things, Father, in your Son's name. Amen. Amen. So, folks, what we've been doing is we've been talking about the Ten Commandments, and just a really, really quick recap. In the first commandment, what we began to understand and what began to unlock was this notion that maybe what's going on in the Ten Commandments is something greater than just God laying down a set of rules for the Israelites. Maybe, just maybe, what's happening is God is actually revealing who He is, His character, and He's trying to teach His children and generations to come more about Him. He's trying to teach us about who He is. So if that is truly the case, if that's really what He is doing, then it begs us to actually examine these commandments from a different point of view. All too often, like we talked about last week, the commandments have been looked at as the thou shalt nots. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And unfortunately, even evangelical churches and some churches like the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they have been looked at as legalistic churches. Churches that unfortunately begin to set up rules and tell you what you can and cannot do, and then it becomes this this system of legalism. And what I think gets missed here is a God who is trying to reveal Himself as He originally was seen in the very beginning. And you find statements all through the Old Testament, especially in the beginning of the Old Testament, where God has a desire to go back to that relationship, that original relationship. And it's not so much that he doesn't love us now. It's not that at all. He loves us so much so that even before there was sin, there was actually a plan in place so that because of the foreknowledge that we would sin, that there was a way made to bring us back to that original relationship. Even still, a God who loves so much, he has that desire. And so that really catapults us into this second commandment. And we talked last week about graven images. We broke this up into 3 parts. And so we said that last week the title was going to be graven images. And this week we're going to talk about the second part of the second commandment. And we called this one jealous beyond measure. And let's read this. The Exodus 20 verses 4 through 6. That's where we are. In the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible. The first book is Genesis. The second book of the Bible is Exodus. Okay? Genesis and Exodus. Exodus, and we're going to chapter 20, and then we're going to go to verse 4. We're starting with verse 4. And I'm going to read through all through verse 6. This is what it says. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. In verse 5, thou shalt not bow down thyself, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me, showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. That was verse 6, showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. We're going to focus today on verse 5. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. Now, last week we started as scratching the surface of a spirited discussion with this phrase of them that hate me. And we were looking at 2 different versions of the Bible. One version of the Bible here in the new, I'm reading from the Authorized King James Version, and it says the generation of them that hate me. And Lisa was reading from the Contemporary English Version, where it says those who reject me. And then we got into this discussion of whether or not those who reject me and them that hate me, if there was actually a difference between the two. And so someone felt that there was a big difference between rejecting God and hating God. And so I threw out the question, is there any difference in the outcome of hating God and rejecting God? Do you think God does anything different? Do you think the outcome with God is different, hating God or rejecting God? Well, now, it's easy for me to come with my opinion and tell you what I think about that. So rather than give my opinion and rather than try to arm twist and whatnot, what I did, I started looking and I thought about this word jealous. I literally thought about this word jealous all week long, from that conversation all through the week. And I just personally just thought about what I thought about that word jealous. And instead of trying to even color my own opinion about what the Bible had to say, or about what any other church had to say, or about what Wikipedia had to say, or about anything. I just wanted to think about my own personal mistakes, my own personal triumphs, my own personal life experience. What did I think about the word jealous? Well, when I think of jealous or jealousy, I think of something that I feel belongs to me. Now, I'm careful when I use that word belong, Because when I think of, I don't think of it as a possession. So it's important for me to make that distinction here. When I say I think about something that belongs to me. My car belongs to me. So if I saw someone driving my car, that would not be possible unless one of two things. Someone would either have had taken my car keys and without my permission and started driving down the street. I would not have jealous feelings if someone took my car keys and drove off with my car. The feelings that I would have would not be jealousy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So now, the other feeling, the other way I look at the belonging is something that I have entered into an agreement or emotional attachment to, and for some reason that is somewhere else. You know, that I see that relationship or that agreement breached in some way or shape or fashion, and that agreement being made with someone else, unbeknownst to me, without my knowledge, without my consent, without my permission. So let's go back to the car. Is it possible that someone could take my car without my permission and without my knowledge? Sure, that's what theft is. Would I have jealous feelings if my car was stolen? No. If I loaned my car to someone and they took it, would I be having jealous feelings? No, because I knew ahead of time and I loaned them my car. So that is a personal belonging. That is an object. So what makes a difference? What makes the difference where then all of a sudden jealousy or jealous feelings come into play? The only way I knew how to begin to solve this problem is what I always know how. It's how I always do it. I have to go back to the Bible and look at Bible stories. One of the things I've always talked about with folks is genealogies, and I learned this from my father, and he told me how important genealogies were. And I can remember growing up, and really I was probably well into my 30s before genealogies ever had any significance to me, and my father would tell me about them. Excuse me. I remember reading in the Bible, and I would get to Numbers and read about the begats. I would look in Leviticus, and I would see the begats, and I would, even in the New Testament, you get to this person begat that person and that person, and I would just think, oh my gosh, I would always skip the begats, and I would go past the begats, and then once I got past the begats, then I would start reading the stories. And what I didn't realize was the significance of what I was missing in those storylines. So I wish that I've done this before, and I promise this will be the last time I do this. I promise that, because I have them all printed, I have them all in my tablet right here, that I could be literally printing out and in a big poster behind me, or putting them on the TV, and I really should do that and hook it up, because it's really easy. I don't have to print anything, and I could put it out so you could see it. I have the genealogy, the generations from Adam to Noah, and that's actually part of where I'm going to go today, because I'm actually not going to go through that generation, but I'm going to start with Noah. Noah has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And actually, Shem is the oldest son, and Japheth is actually the second oldest, Ham being the third oldest, from what I can and from what I've been able to ascertain as I read. Shem, the firstborn son of Noah, and he's the brother of Japheth and Ham. And here's something this was my aha moment of my study. Because I have, since that time when my father taught me about genealogies, I feel like I've really stepped up my game and paid attention. But this was an aha moment for me. And so I'm going to read it to you just like I discovered it. Shem was the firstborn son of Noah and brother of Japheth and Ham. This is in Genesis 10:21 and 9:24. This is how you can find that out. He also had a wife. Actually, all four of them did. But his wife isn't named, and we don't know where she came from. This was actually before the flood, okay? So we get this all down pat. Now, the Bible is clear. Noah was 500 years old when he fathered Shem, and 600 years old when the flood hit, which means that Shem was a crisp century old when he had his family. And I actually read myself in Genesis, I think I was in Genesis 8 or 9, that Shem was 100 years old when he had his first child. Actually, he was about 102 when he had his first child. It says here, Shem died in the year 502. He lived 500 years after the flood, and he had many children during that time. Now, here was my aha moment. 502 years after the flood, which is 35 years after Abraham died. Shem outlived Abraham. Now let's just sit and think about that for a second. God creates Adam. There are 7 generations from Adam to Noah. And then there's the flood. The 8th generation outlives Abraham. Abraham, who is the father of Isaac and Ishmael. Shem outlives Abraham. Shem is alive for the conflict of Abraham and his 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Shem, whose father speaks directly with God, is alive when God speaks to Abraham and gives him the promise of being the father of many nations. Shem, who is an antediluvian, who has borne witness with his own eyes the fiery, flaming sword of the Garden of Eden. For 100 years he has seen this, and now for 500 years can tell the story to those generations whose life expectancy has now been cut short to 100 years. He lives through 5 generations of people, telling them of his first-hand witness of the Garden of Eden.
Yes.
When Abraham offers his son as a sacrifice, Shem is still alive to bear witness to that experience. And we wonder why Abraham has such faith. Because he is able to converse with someone who has seen the Garden of Eden. As we continue on, it says, at God's instruction, Noah gathered a male and female couple of every animal and 7 individuals from every bird species and clean kind of animal. Since Noah also brought 7 humans along, namely his wife and 3 sons, plus their wives, humans neatly fit into the clean animal group, or else the birds group. After the flood receded and all creatures disembarked, Shem's brother Ham insulted his father, and his son Canaan was cursed accordingly. You get that? His son was cursed accordingly. Shem and Japheth were to live together in tents, and Canaan was to be their servant. Shem became the ancestor of Abraham and thus Jesus. Luke 3:36, you can find that information. Where Shem is spelled in Greek with, you can't see my Greek. And when the field of linguistics was invented, Shem also lent his name to the language group that Hebrew is a part of, Semitic. So now when you get to anti-Semitic, keep that in mind. That was an aha moment for me, because it never occurred to me that an antediluvian would outlive Abraham. Antediluvian is people who lived before the flood. So, of course, I'm thinking, because before the flood, I completely spaced off Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And, of course, Noah. So, Noah lived for 300 years past the flood. He died at the ripe old age of 950 years old. But, you sort of kind of know he's going to die and you don't think about it. But to live for 300 years afterwards is an incredible thought. Shem is the father of Eber, who his sons and daughters, Eber becomes the father. He becomes where you get the name Hebrews, the sons of Eber. And then he eventually has, through that lineage where you get Abraham. So Shem is Abraham's great grandfather. As you study this, and now I'm going to help you get some relevance here, so that everybody's like, okay, what does this have to do with jealousy? Remember what I said. Remember what I said about God's desire to go back to the beginning. It's sort of ironic to me that in God's desire to go back to the beginning, and God's desire, because he repented that he made man, and that word repent is an American English word, because that word repent is actually not in the Bible. The actual word used is derived from a word called teshuvah, which means to return. God literally, his desire was to return back to that one-on-one relationship that he had with Adam, and he didn't have that. And this Semitic root, it appears to denote this idea right here. This is where I'm going to get. As we go through and we dissect this word from the original text here, I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. This word jealous, it actually comes from the Strong's Concordance. Strong's Concordance, and if you want to look it up, you just remember 7067, and you can actually go to not Wikipedia, you can go to your Google, and you can type in Strong's Concordance 7067, and it will bring up this word for you. And the word is kana. It's actually spelled, the transliteration is spelled Q-A-N-N-A. I suppose we would pronounce it Quana, but it's actually kana. And this is what it means. It appears to denote becoming deep red. In the Arabic, it actually denotes the same thing. As such, spawns words all over the Semitic language spectrum that have to do with jealousy. This probably has nothing to do with getting an angry red face, but rather with jealousy being a definite quality of life. In other words, jealousy is right up there with love and hate, although in our stunted modern world, it's not often recognized as such. There's an article from the source that I was reading. They have these things called Daman words, which includes the name Adam. And these Daman words and the noun dam mean blood. Adam. And if you can see the spelling, the Hebrew spelling, you realize that in how they use kana and part of that jealousy, part of those, how that spelling is in there. We're going to keep going because you can't see all that stuff. In the Hebrew derived the feminine noun, which is ardor, zeal, or jealousy. Unlike someone who steals out of hunger, someone who copulates with his neighbor's wife cannot count on understanding and forgiveness, but can count on wounds and disgrace, because jealousy enrages a man. Proverbs 6:3, 27 and 4. 6:34 and 27, verse 4. Jealousy was recognized to be such a strong emotion that substantial piece of Mosaic legislation dealt specifically with jealous feelings of a husband towards his supposedly unfaithful wife. I think they should have had it so that it dealt with both, don't you? I know. And that's where things are a little different in modern. Let me get right to it. Still, the preacher recognized that every labor and every skill which is done comes from the rivalry between men, and lists zeal in Ecclesiastes, right along love and hate. The exact same word serves to describe a person's zeal for righteousness, which is obviously taps into the greater marriage and adultery theme that explains the relationship between Yahweh and mankind. Now, I'm going to just skip over this because a lot of this stuff is stuff that makes sense to me, and then it's not going to do anything. But here, towards the end here, I want to give you this right here. Two adjectives derive from this root. Both mean jealous. But both mean jealous, and both are applied to God, namely kana and kano and kana, which is used in the Lord's important confession that He is a jealous God. This is what God says in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5:9. The thing that's most important in all of this is this word kana. This word kana is only used 6 times in the Bible. And in the Bible, these 6 times that it's used, it's only used in an epithet towards God. It is used in such a way that it helps explain the name of God. It helps explain, and it's actually later on in Exodus 34:14, it's even stated that it's another name for God. Exodus 34:14, for thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. How I'm trying to tie all this together. In 1 John 4:8, John the Beloved describes God as love. God is love. But no one ever talks about the other name for God. I was reading that this name kana is actually one of the root words or root names, kana or Cana. When they used this word, this name jealous God, it was Elkanah. So that there are actually people in the Bible. There was one high priest, and his name was Elkanah, named after God. The relationship that God has here in this second commandment, when He says, "Thou shalt not bow down to them nor serve them, For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting upon the iniquities of the father, the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. This word hate, them that who are against me. Them who, when Lisa says, those who reject me. And with the Bible here, when I looked it up, and it actually says hate. Enemies, that was another word that was used. It was clear that as I read this, there's a distinction that's being made. The importance of understanding Shem, and Shem being alive and taking this information and being able to describe what he saw and understanding the wickedness that existed before the flood, and taking that information and carrying it on, and being able to see the conflict and be able to understand that there were those who loved God, and then there were those who mocked God, to then somehow begin to find gray areas and split hairs and decide whether or not there was a difference between one or the other. Shem would beg to differ. Shem would be able to say there was no difference because there were only so many people who got on the ark. And everyone who got on the ark because they were obedient and loved God. Everyone else did not get on board, and they were all lost. They all had the opportunity to see the desire that God had, and that was simply this: to return. And even in the name Adam, blood, when Adam's son, Cain, slays his brother, what does God say to Cain? He says, your brother's blood cries out to me. The lifeblood of his first creation was such that when it was taken, even God understood, and even God knew that that life was gone and that life was taken. And as that blood is spilled and it continues to pool down through the ages, I can see how God, in his rage and God in his jealousy, says, I repent that I have made man. Not because he is sorry that he did such a thing, else he would not have named Adam Adam. He wants to return and go back to Adam. He wants to go back to that perfect relationship. He wants to do that. And as, in my opinion, proof of that desire, Shem is on board that ark. The one who will keep the promise made to Adam that his son Jesus would be born, would come through the ages, is on the ark. That even though he would somehow have this in his heart, in the English language, this repentance, but in the language of the sons of Eber, this teshuvah, this desire to return and go back to the beginning. He takes that promise and he passes it on by Shem being on that boat. And that promise being so important, so sure, it outlives the last man that we know of who walks and talks with God, the last man that's recorded in the Bible to walk and talk with God. And he outlives that man so that the information is sure to be passed on, so that there are people who are able to witness someone who has a first-hand account of the Garden of Eden, that flaming sword. So much so that now, when Moses receives the 10 Commandments, and then God writes on these tables of stone that I don't want you to build idols that represent other gods and other things to worship. I want you to worship me and me alone. Because when you do these other things, what you are doing is you are being against Shem. You are anti-Semitic. You are anti-me. You are going against who I am. I am the Creator God. When you put these things before me, when you put these things in front of me, I can no longer, I can't take it anymore, because my name is jealous. I am a jealous God. So, in conclusion, folks, when I read this is how I'm going to end it right here. In Exodus 34:14, I just read it to you. Thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. So that we understand how clear God is and what his jealousy really means. This is why he puts in this, that his jealousy, it continues on, and it continues on upon the fathers of the third and the fourth generations of them that hate me, those who despise him, those who reject him, those who would find it okay to put things before him, to take and decide that, you know what, God's not so important. It begs me to look in my own life and say, what am I doing? What is going on in my life that I decide is more important? Is there something that's more important than taking the time to prepare this message? Is there something more important in my life that that I decide that, you know what, I can put that off for another day because, God, he's going to do his part. He's going to, because, no, there isn't anything more important. Because what I'm saying is God, who is the author and the sustainer of life, God, who is the one who is the creator, and who, as David says, who is man that thou art mindful of him? Who is the Son of Man that thou would visit him? When I consider the works of thy fingers, I consider the heavens. Amen. That's what I'm saying when I decide that something is more important than God. So when God begins the verse of the commandments, and he starts off by saying, I, the Lord, am your God, and then he says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. It begins to set this template to help everyone understand who he is and how he is trying to reintroduce himself to his people who have been enslaved in a world that have enjoyed many gods that have the ability to do nothing, when he is the God that has the ability to do everything, even beyond their wildest imagination. And that someone would decide that these are more important. It goes back now to the flood for all those who said they could see the Garden of Eden, and they were somehow able to just ignore it. And in my opinion, this is why Shem outlives Abraham, so that there could be a testimony of someone, so that just like they could see the Garden of Eden, those around could see Shem, the one who would become the father, the grandfather, the great-grandfather of Jesus. They could see him, and he lived for a ripe old age of 502 years, outliving Abraham. Folks, I'm really glad that you were able to tune in with us today. I hope that somehow you were able to follow my thoughts and that this made sense to you. God loves us, and his jealousy is not a sinful jealousy. It's not a jealousy without merit. It's a jealousy that says we belong to him. It's a jealousy that says that his name has blood in it. His son has given his life and shed his blood so that you and I may one day live forever. Imagine, if you will, being close enough that one day you will feel the breath of God upon you, and knowing then that that breath will allow you to live forever. Hey, thanks. I can't wait to see you again next week. And next week, we're going to do a new turn on this, and we're going to get into verse 6 on this, and we're going to talk about love that abounds. All right. Take care. Happy Sabbath.